Hello, everyone. Have you heard about the new dietary practice called intermittent fasting? Well, this is Gary Sams, the Chief Wellness Officer for EBAW's Benefits Administration and Wellness. And that's the topic of our webinar this month, intermittent fasting. And in particular, we're going to talk about, of course, just what is intermittent fasting, how do we define it, how do you do it, and a tip off there are several methods that you can try if you're interested in looking at intermittent fasting. We're going to talk a little bit about what the science has to say as far as the health benefits if you choose to practice intermittent fasting. And then we'll have a few concluding remarks pointing out some cautionary notes for particular people. So let's get started with our definition here. What is intermittent fasting? Well, just as the title would explain, it's periodically going without food or fasting, without taking in calories. And it's really about when you eat as opposed to what you eat. And that's a little bit different for us because typically in our webinars, we talk about dietary practices and we're talking about a specific diet of what you eat. Something like the Atkins diet or Weight Watchers or the paleo diet, the ketone diet, the Mediterranean diet. The list goes on and on and on of these popular diets out there. But in that case, again, it's focused on what you eat: protein, carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables, nuts, what have you. In this case, though, it's all about when. And the specific intentional practice of fasting has actually been around for a long time, and particularly as it relates to certain religious traditions. Many religious groups have fasting as a part of their history, usually to observe a holy day of some kind, but it's been around for a long time, so it's nothing new to us. And when we think of it, fasting is the actual practice of fasting or going through a fast, not having food to eat, has been around with us since the beginning of time. And in fact, it's probably most of our history where we have forcibly been forced into fasting because we haven't had access to food, more so than what we see today in our modern society. We have pretty much 24/7 access to food, thankfully, but that wasn't always the case. In our evolution, we kind of evolved as hunters and gatherers, and there were many times when we didn't have access to food, so we were forced to fast. In our system, our body, our metabolism, our physiology certainly adapted to periods of fasting as it being more common than not. And it's only again in more recent times where we've had access to food on a 24/7 basis. So I'd venture to say that the concept of snacking was pretty unknown, a very foreign concept to our ancestors. So how do you actually do intermittent fasting? Well, as you can guess, similar to the diets that we listed before, Atkins, Mediterranean, and so on, there are several methods of conducting an intermittent fast. And all of them, though, however, involve this concept of a time of the day or week where you're taking in calories and a significant time of day or week when you're not taking any calories. It's an intermittent in nature. And in those fasting periods, though, I should point out, in the one that we're going to talk about, the 5-2 diet, you can actually consume some calories. But most of the time, we're talking about not having any calories when we're in that fasting period. So the most popular that we have to review, the 16-8 method, is also called the Lean Gains Protocol, and it involves skipping breakfast and restricting your daily eating period to 8 hours. So that would be eating from noon to 8, that's your eating period, and then the other 16 hours, you're fasting. The Eat, Stop, Eat method involves fasting for a complete day, a 24-hour period, once or twice a week. And There again, you pick a time, you have breakfast one day, and then you don't eat until the next breakfast or dinner to dinner, but you go a 24-hour period without consuming calories. The 5-2 diet, this is the method that I mentioned, that you are only reducing your calories to 500 to 6 calories on 2 non-consecutive days of the week. So Monday, Wednesday, for example, you're eating only 500 calories, which isn't a lot considering that, most men, for example, consume at least 2,000 calories a day. Women, slightly less than that. So you're reducing it to 500 to 600 calories, and then you eat normally on the other days. Most people tend to find the 16-8 method to be the simplest and easiest to follow, so that seems to be the most popular. So what has science had to say about the health benefits? And there's several that I found in the literature. The ones that I want to point out today, though, weight loss, as you would guess. If we restrict our calories coming in, that typically leads to weight loss. Insulin resistance is another reported benefit. Intermittent fasting reduces insulin resistance, our blood sugar, and that has an impact on our risk for developing or addressing type 2 diabetes. So insulin resistance, another one. Inflammation. Some studies show reduction in the markers of inflammation, and as you're probably aware, inflammation is viewed as a culprit in many of the chronic conditions that we deal with, everything from heart disease to arthritis, musculoskeletal issues. A number of different things have inflammation as a component. Heart health, as we were just talking about, seems to reduce the bad or LDL cholesterol and triglycerides. Also, in some studies, which I'll point out one here in a moment, seems to have an impact on reducing blood pressure. Cancer animal studies suggest that intermittent fasting can reduce cancer risk. It also has shown good benefits on brain health and in anti-aging. And just something to keep in mind, most of the studies that have been done today on the impacts of intermittent fasting have been done on animals as opposed to humans, but there are studies that are taking place now. So it's something to keep an eye out for. But at least the early studies involving animals seem to show some real promise. One of those studies that I wanted to kind of profile a little bit more deeply, and this came from the University of Alabama, they conducted a study with a small group of obese men with prediabetes. So they weren't yet diabetic, they just had prediabetes, and they compared a form of intermittent fasting called early time restricted feeding. And that's where all meals were fit into an early 8-hour period of the day, say 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Or in the other group, it was spread out over 12 hours between 7 and 7. Both groups maintained their weight. They didn't gain or lose. But after 5 weeks, the 8-hour group had dramatically lower insulin levels and significantly improved insulin sensitivity, as well as significantly lower blood pressure. And the best part that they say was that the 8-hour group also had significantly decreased appetite. So even though they were fasting like that, they weren't starving. So just changing the timing of meals by eating earlier in the day and extending the overnight fast significantly benefited metabolism, even in people who didn't lose weight. In conclusion, there doesn't seem to be a need to follow a structured intermittent fasting plan to derive at least some of the benefits that we talked about. So what's recommended is for you to experiment with different approaches and find something that you enjoy and that fits your schedule. A cautionary note, people who are underweight or have a history of eating disorders should not do intermittent fasting and should not fast as we've described today. There's also some evidence that intermittent fasting may be harmful to some women. So as always, when we're talking about a new health practice, we recommend that you consult and have a discussion with your primary care provider, the health professional that you have a relationship with, and discuss with them if they feel that intermittent fasting is something that you would benefit from. So as always, thank you for your time and attention today. I wish you the best of luck with this intermittent fasting practice if you choose to try it. And please let us know how it works for you if you do. Thanks so much.